I used to believe that silence in marriage meant comfort, mature love. But over time, that silence started to feel like suffocation. My husband barely looked at me anymore. We coexisted, side by side, like polite roommates. No spark, no tension, not even arguments to remind us we were still alive in this thing together. Just a dull ache. I would lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, aching for him to reach for me, to hold me, to see me, but the only thing I felt was his breath, turned away from me, drifting into sleep while I stayed awake with questions I never dared ask out loud. That's where the cracks began, not in the body, but in the soul. I didn't cheat in the traditional sense. I wasn't sneaking off or hiding messages. But the emotional betrayal had already begun. His disinterest had become my wound, and I was bleeding quietly in every corner of our home. When I touched him, he stiffened. When I tried to initiate intimacy, he brushed it off with a tired smile or a vague excuse. And over time, those small rejections grew louder than any screaming match could. That's what most people don't understand about emotional cheating. It doesn't always start with someone else. Sometimes it starts when the person you love stops trying, stops noticing, stops caring. And yet I kept pretending. I wore the mask of the loyal wife, smiled through family dinners, laughed at his coworkers' jokes, and washed our sheets even though they hadn't held any real love in months. My heart was aching, my body starving, not just for touch, but for presence, for acknowledgement, for passion. I would look in the mirror and wonder, am I still desirable? Am I still a woman? Or am I just his background noise? The truth is, the silence in our marriage had become the loudest part of my life. And I hated that I started to understand how women could become unfaithful wives, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation to feel alive again. Then came Lena, confident, magnetic, and devastatingly bold. She didn't sneak into my life. She walked in, eyes blazing and soul wide open. And when she listened to my confession, my shameful, silent truth, she didn't judge me. She leaned in and said, "Maybe you just need someone to remind him what he has." That sentence rewired everything. And that, right there, was the first moment in this entire forbidden confession that I felt something stir inside me again. Something dangerous. Something necessary. Lena wasn't just my coworker. She was the kind of woman who made every room shift when she walked in. Her confidence was unsettling, not because it was loud, but because it was effortless. She didn't try to be sexy, she just was. The kind of woman who wore her desires like perfume, subtle, but impossible to ignore. I always admired her freedom, even envied it a little. Where I shrank, Lena expanded. Where I hesitated, she acted. So when I finally told her how invisible I felt in my own marriage, she didn't gasp. She just tilted her head and said, "I've seen the way your husband looks at me." That hit like lightning. I should have felt anger, maybe even jealousy, but all I felt was interest, curiosity, a forbidden flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Because deep down, I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I felt like I was already gone. That's the twisted part of emotional cheating. Sometimes, it makes you crave what you already suspect has slipped through your fingers. Lena didn't say it to hurt me. She said it to wake me up. And it worked. Because the thought of her, someone so alive, so present, near my husband, stirred something in me. Not rage, but desire. For clarity, for truth, for danger. It was the beginning of my forbidden confession. "I could show you," she said, leaning against the office coffee machine like she was talking about spreadsheets, not seduction. "Show me what?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled, slow and deliberate. "What you're missing and how to get it back." That's when it became real. This wasn't just flirtation. It was an invitation to step outside of guilt, to observe what I had been denied, and maybe, just maybe, to reclaim what I thought had died inside me. I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I didn't say no either. And that pause, that silence between question and answer, that was the first real infidelity in our story. There's something magnetic about watching someone say out loud what you've only dared to whisper in your mind. That's what Lena did. She gave voice to the unspeakable. She cracked open the door I had spent years trying to keep shut. And the moment she looked at me and said, "Let's do this on your terms," I felt the shift. This wasn't about betraying him. It was about reclaiming me, my body, my power, my presence. And that's when I knew I was no longer a cheating wife waiting to be caught. I was a woman on the edge of rediscovery. It felt like setting a trap, only I wasn't sure if I was the hunter or the prey. The moment Lena stepped into my home, everything felt different. She didn't hesitate. She wore a silk blouse that hugged her body just enough to make a point. Confident, intentional. My husband greeted her with that polite surprise reserved for friends you don't expect at dinner, but his eyes lingered for a second too long. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be just an experiment. It was going to be a revelation, one that I invited into my home, into my marriage, and into my emotional chaos. I watched from the kitchen, heart pounding as Lena leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Her touch was subtle, a brush of the shoulder, a hand on his forearm. Nothing overt, but everything was loaded. I saw it in his face, the confusion, the intrigue, the slow unraveling of resistance. It was surreal watching my emotional betrayal play out in real time, and yet I wasn't angry. I was captivated. This wasn't a cheating story like the ones whispered in shame. It was a controlled storm of curiosity, desire, and suspended judgment. Lena glanced at me. Her eyes didn't ask for permission. They acknowledged it had already been granted. She moved slowly, deliberately, placing her hand on his knee as they talked. My husband didn't pull away. He didn't look over at me. And yet, I wasn't shattered. I was studying them, studying him, watching what he responded to, the way he smiled, the way his body shifted. I was learning from my own forbidden confession, mapping out what I'd missed for so long, not just in him, but in me. I wasn't just observing intimacy, I was reclaiming my power through it. And then it happened. She kissed him. Not rough, not fast. Just a soft, lingering kiss that held every ounce of permission and provocation. I should have stopped it, but I didn't. I couldn't, because that kiss didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like truth. A real infidelity story was unfolding before my eyes, and I was a part of it, not its victim. And just as I thought I'd seen everything I needed, Lena looked back and said, "Now it's your turn." And in that moment, I wasn't a spectator anymore. I was stepping into the fire. I thought I was controlling. I froze for a moment, caught between two conflicting truths. One, that I had invited this. The other, that I wasn't ready for what it stirred in me. Lena's kiss still lingered on his lips, and he looked at her like he hadn't looked at me in years. Not with love, but with curiosity, hunger, presence. And I realized something painful and beautiful all at once. I wanted to be seen like that too. Not out of revenge, not out of rage, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to be desired with intention. Lena reached out for my hand, steady and warm. "Come here," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I did. I crossed that invisible line between thought and action, between fantasy and reality. I joined them, my husband and my friend, and for the first time in forever, I felt present in my own skin. There was no shame, no guilt, just breath, heat, movement. This wasn't just a cheating wife story. This was a confession of emotional rediscovery, unfolding one whispered touch at a time. He looked at me, stunned. His hands moved carefully, reverently, like he wasn't sure if this was real. I smiled, not for reassurance, but because I wanted it too. His touch woke something in me, something Lena had already triggered. We weren't just sharing each other. We were reconnecting through a path I never imagined taking. A path paved with trust, contradiction, and forbidden intimacy that somehow didn't feel wrong at all. It felt like survival. The moment built slowly, like a storm you can't stop. I was no longer a silent wife in a dead marriage. I was a woman reclaiming space, in his arms, in my choices, in my skin. The three of us moved in rhythm, not in chaos. Every glance, every sigh, every touch, it all told the story I'd been too afraid to write. And in that moment, wrapped in them both, I realized this wasn't a betrayal. This was my rebirth. There was a moment, right in the middle of everything, when time slowed down. His eyes met mine, and suddenly, it wasn't about Lena. It wasn't about the situation. It was about us. Two people who had lost each other in the silence of routine, in the cold distance of unspoken resentments. And now, here we were reconnecting in the most unexpected, forbidden way imaginable. This wasn't just a forbidden confession. It was a resurrection. One born not out of betrayal, but out of desperate emotional need. I saw something in him that I thought was gone. Hunger. Focus. That electric, unfiltered pull toward my body. It wasn't just lust, it was realization. His hands moved with purpose, like he was trying to relearn me. And I let him. I surrendered, not to him or her, but to the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking or guessing, I was feeling. Fully, fiercely, without apology. That's what true emotional cheating reveals. It's not always about another person. Sometimes, it's about remembering you still exist. Lena didn't interrupt. She facilitated. She watched with a half smile, knowing this wasn't her climax, but mine. My husband whispered my name like it still belonged to him. And maybe, for a moment, it did. Because what we found in that tangled, charged, intimate chaos wasn't just physical redemption. It was clarity. I felt his body react to mine like it had years ago, before the walls were built. Before the silence became the third person in our marriage. The intensity didn't explode. It expanded, slowly, deliberately, like it knew we couldn't handle more than one truth at a time. When it ended, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled a version of myself I didn't even know I was holding back. That night wasn't about cheating, it was about coming back to life. And I would never see him, or myself, the same again. The next morning, the house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you realize something irreversible just happened. I sat in the kitchen, coffee in hand, hair a mess, still wrapped in my robe. He walked in like he didn't know how to move around me anymore. Lena had already left. No dramatic exit. No goodbye. Just a faint scent on the pillow and a memory already sinking into the walls. And there we were, me and him, facing a marriage that had just gone through something most couples don't come back from. But for us, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. He didn't say much, just stood there studying me. Then, almost like it cost him everything, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." That broke me more than anger ever could. Because in that one sentence, I knew he had felt it too. That distance, that absence, that ache. He wasn't unfaithful to hurt me. I wasn't emotionally cheating to betray him. We were just lost. And in a strange, forbidden confession, Lena became the mirror we couldn't hold up to each other anymore. I don't know what we are now. We didn't define it. We didn't write new rules or pretend it didn't happen. But something shifted. He touches me differently now, like he knows I'm still here. Like he remembers I'm not just the mother of his children or the one who folds his shirts. I'm a woman, a body, a soul. I can't erase what happened, and honestly, I don't want to, because it woke me up. It reminded me that real intimacy requires risk, and sometimes the biggest betrayal isn't touching another body. It's forgetting to reach for the one next to you. This wasn't just a cheating wife story. It wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a woman's journey back to herself, through discomfort, through risk, through fire. And if you're still here listening, maybe it touched something in you too. Maybe this real forbidden confession says something we're all too afraid to admit, that emotional infidelity doesn't always end a relationship. Sometimes it saves it. Maybe this wasn't the story you expected, but then again, maybe it's the one you needed to hear. This wasn't just a story of infidelity or a cheating wife confession. It was a real woman navigating silence, desire, and rediscovery. A forbidden confession that blurred the lines between betrayal and awakening, between heartbreak and healing. And now I want to know, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever watched love fade and had to choose between staying invisible or risking everything to feel alive again? If this story moved something inside you, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, turn on the bell, and share this with someone who needs it. Because here, at Unfaithful Tales, we don't just tell stories. We speak the truths no one dares to say out loud.